Ooh. Didn't know it did that. Yeah, welcome everyone. This is the last talk in the Kindling Farm Webinar Series entitled Cooperatives, the Importance of Cooperatives in the Food Sovereignty Movement. And yeah, we're just kind of highlighting the importance of cooperatives, especially this week because it is the beginning of Co-ops Fortnight, which is a UK nationwide kind of effort to highlight the importance and all the work that cooperatives do. And yeah, we've got some really amazing speakers. We've got Marlena from Organic Lee, a cooperative farm in London, Lucy from SUMA Whole Foods, which is a wholesale based in the north, and we've got Kelly from Unicorn Grocery, which is a cooperative whole foods shop in Manchester. So yeah, some really exciting and interesting speakers who are going to basically talk us through the importance of cooperatives in the food sovereignty movement by looking at the different stages of the food production system, and yeah, why they're so important in kind of tackling the industrialized food production system that we've kind of found ourselves in. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Marlena, who will talk about Organic Lee.
Thanks, Lizzie. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm going to talk about Organic Lee. I'm a member of the co-op and a director. My name is Marlena Barrett. I use she, her pronouns. I think I'm going to see if I can get my screen share to work, so you don't have to look at me, you can look at my photos. Yeah, can people see that okay? Yeah, great. So Organic Lee is a workers' cooperative, and I'll talk more about what that means in a moment. Set up in 2001 and started with the idea that more food can and should be grown in London, and that people can connect together by growing food and sharing it together. Started out on some allotment plots that were disused and used to have a sort of fairly, yeah, although always started with the idea of being a workers' cooperative, there wasn't any paid work to start with. There was a volunteer group of people coming together, growing food together, sharing the harvest, and then gradually setting up some training workshops and things like that. And then in 2008, we got the opportunity to take on this site that you can see in the picture, which is Hawkwood Nursery, a 12-acre former council plant nursery, which looked a lot more empty then, but now we've kind of planted up in a big way. And we currently have, I had to count this up today, 28 full and probationary co-op members and around 10 to 15 other people who are involved mainly in short-term work, or that might be things like working on our box pack, or involved in some of our outreach work like schools programs and so on. We're trying not to have too many people sort of who are knocking around for long term but not being fully involved in the co-op, and I think that will become clear as I try to explain a bit more about how we work. So just to say a bit more about how do I get to next slide? Yeah, about what we do. So we produce and distribute food and plants. We do that in a way that maximizes the number of people involved and minimizes the machinery. So there's a lot of learning and skills involved, sort of training courses and so on, and a big volunteering program. And sort of a link to that is a lot of health and well-being activity, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And just to say about our finances, yeah, it's around about 60% of what we have as our income is our own generated income, whether that's from the produce sales, our box scheme, our contracts with schools or with housing associations to run different activities with them. And then the rest is grant funding. And those numbers sort of fluctuate a bit, especially when we get big capital grants, but that's the sort of rough kind of trend that we've had over the last sort of 10 years. Our turnover is around about £1 million at the moment. It's increased quite substantially, actually, our box schemes increased over the lockdown in the past year. So So yeah, just to say a little bit more about those things. At the moment, we've got about 1,000 fruit and veg boxes per week being distributed, mainly by electric van and cargo bike. And then our volunteering, I mean, it's quite a range of different things that we do, but around 250 people in total per year. And some of that is referrals, things like social prescribing, or people coming in from, you know, I guess it ranges, people with mental health, in mental health recovery, people with learning disabilities, people who've been long-term unemployed, but everything sort of integrated together rather than sort of separate activities for people. And then in terms of our learners, we do level 1 and level 2 accredited horticulture courses, but also have quite a tailored, I suppose, approach to volunteering, where people can get different opportunities to learn specific skills around the harvest, for example. And then we have 9 trainees each year and an apprentice, and a farm start programme where we've been supporting people to learn the skills to be a commercial grower and to get land and to be mentored as they start off on that journey. So definitely sort of trying to grow that idea of people being involved in food production in a collective way. And we also probably work, I guess we've worked on about 20 different sites around the borough where we've supported little community gardens to happen over the years, whether that's with sometimes it's with a housing association or with the council, or we've another group who are doing a kind of community apothecary that we've been working with. So they're doing like herbal medicine beds, those kind of things. And then some are in schools. We also have some schools who come to site, and we have some children with special educational needs who come. And sometimes we've had young people who are at risk of exclusion from school, or who are excluded from school, or in pupil referral units. So quite a range of different people coming and being involved in our activity, but using the sort of, not just being grant funded for that work, but using the sort of production of fruit and veg as sort of the core basis of that, really. I obviously could say loads more about what we do, but you know, I've been asked to talk about how we do it, so I'm going to speak a bit more about that. So cooperatives, well, here's my kind of kick-off definition of what a cooperative is. That a basic thing is a group of people who get together to organise collectively for their mutual benefit. There are lots of different types of cooperative. It can be housing, consumer co-ops. There can be multi-stakeholder co-ops where the consumers and the workers are all members of the same co-op. It could be people coming together to sort of join their forces for marketing, like a group of producers or some therapists who hire a room together. It could be a community pub, it could be a credit union, it could be a community supported agriculture we were just talking about before we started, where the consumers, so the people who are going to buy the food, come together with the people who are going to grow the food and agree how it's going to be done. So lots of different types. The specific one we're talking about is a worker co-op, or workers cooperative, depending on how you like your apostrophes. My definition of that would be a form of business organisation where the activities are managed by the workers directly, without the need for separate managers, owners, or bosses or shareholders. And it's worth just maybe noting that that's not a legal form. That's not like a kind of legal definition. There are international cooperative principles that define what a cooperative is and what principles a cooperative should adhere to. And there are cooperatives all over the world that take many, many different forms. In terms of a sort of, you know, if you're talking about organisations, then we're a community interest company, but we were previously a limited company. Cooperatives in this country can also be community benefit societies or cooperative societies, so they can have different legal forms, but the workers' cooperative is the sort of way that we're choosing to operate in the way we work. So what that means in practice is that there's collective control over our work. So apart from sometimes having to jump through the hoops of funders or our landlord, there isn't outside control, and there's not shareholders or people taking decisions about the running of the business. Some principles that then means is, it's really important to remember that that doesn't mean that there's no management. It means that there's peer management and support, and that's really important to recognise and to make space for, I think, in the way that we structure things. The aim that we would use is sort of a principle of sort of devolving decisions to the smallest possible number of people. I don't know if Unicorn might also talk more about this, but there's a model called sociocracy, which I don't think we're doing it classically, but it's sort of something that we're a little bit involved in the way of how we organise our work and how we make decisions. So that idea that, you know, the people who need to be in the room make the decision. There's often a kind of perception, if you like, that consensus decision making or cooperative and collective ways of doing things are going to be very, very time consuming, because you're going to be in endless meetings where everyone's involved in every single decision. That's definitely not how we work, and I think we do take time to try and make decisions well and to try and get them right, but I think that what that then means is that there is kind of buy-in for those decisions from everybody, and a different way of working than if you've just sort of left a decision to somebody who might have consulted about it but has just gone away and made it themselves. Consensus or consent-based, I mean, we can talk about that more if anyone is interested afterwards, but just to mention that here, the idea of consent-based is just maybe a bit more pragmatic, sort of saying, well, is this a decision I can live with, rather than having to kind of try and spend all the time to get a proposal that every single person is completely happy with, but you kind of go with the best that's available at the time, and is it good enough? So in terms of what that has to do with food sovereignty, just a sort of simple definition, if you like, of food sovereignty there is that it's about communities being able to control the way that food is produced and traded and consumed. And I think it's really important to sort of recognise that that's food sovereignty, and that's different from just thinking about food security. I like the definition that Raj Patel gives, that you could have a dictatorship with McDonald's available to everybody, and that would be food security, but it wouldn't be food sovereignty. It's not just what you eat, it's about how it's produced, how it reaches your plate. And then that's obviously got a mismatch with a corporate system where actually, you know, what corporations are for is to make profit and to extract that profit. Also, they, you know, in the system we see that the costs are externalized, so the cost of pollution, the human cost of people in jobs that they don't actually enjoy, this sort of perception of food, but not just food, but also land that you need for food growing, and water and seeds that you need, they're all treated as commodities. And those things don't fit really with the idea of food sovereignty. And, you know, what you get is what Michael Pollan calls food-like substances, you know, things that are bred for their shelf life rather than for their taste, long supply chains, you know, the global dominance of a few big players. And then I think if you come to the sort of flip side of that and look at food sovereignty, you've got a natural fit with the idea of cooperatives, because you can be focused on, you know, we need to generate income, but we're not driven by profit. We're not driven by those shareholders sort of expecting that. So we can make choices that are not just motivated by money. Those can be environmental and social choices. You know, that's very clear in the cooperative principles. It's about reaching out to the and being community-based or having a community benefit. And I think we can operate also with the people connections that are really important in our work, and the idea of trust, you know, so that shorter supply chains where you actually know where your food is coming from in a much more connected way and a much more trust-based way. And then just to sort of wrap up my tomatoes there, I just put a heading here of plus minus interesting, which is a permaculture tool of just sort of looking at what are the pros and cons of something, but also like sometimes you can't decide whether it's pro and a con, it might just be an interesting. And I wasn't really thinking that, I think there's flip sides of all of these three sort of keywords that I've put here. Responsibility, I think we live in such a sort of hierarchical and non-trust-based society that it's quite a cultural shift to get your head around taking that responsibility for yourself and being part of something where you take that responsibility. It's quite easy to be in a situation where you can blame the boss and just go like it's somebody else's fault. And you know, that can be a challenge, particularly when we're trying to sort of support people from lots of different backgrounds to come together and make sure we've got a diverse and representative workforce. So really thinking about how can we support people to get what it means to be in that co-op and share that responsibility. But the flip side of that is that compared to, you know, somebody who goes off and just works on their own as a you know, like an entrepreneur, then actually you're in a very supportive space with people around you sharing that responsibility. Flexibility, yeah, I think there's something great about sort of having that autonomy, knowing who you're accountable to, but also, you know, being able to, you know, for some people work has to be more time bound, you know, if you have shop opening hours or if you're like packing the veg bags that have to be delivered this week, but for other people, you know, can work to the times that suit you. Definitely that sort of like idea that you can kind of create roles that suit the people rather than fitting people into roles is really good, but you know, the work has to be done as well, so you have got to do a certain level of kind of, yeah, we've got to all fit in and get on with the work here. And so, yeah, there's a balance there, I think. And then trust, I put there again, I've sort of talked about that in terms of people connections. You know, it's amazing to be doing this work that feels like meaningful work. For some people, it's really integrated into our lives as kind of part of our, you know, our social life, and our activism is sort of tied into our work. And for others in the co-op, it isn't. And I think we've had to work quite hard to sort of make sure that that isn't a clash within our culture, that people can feel okay to be busy with this work as a big part of their life or a small part of their life, depending on who they are and what else they're doing. So we've kind of had to really unpack what that culture means, and kind of be clear that you have to sort of, the culture creates the policies rather than the other way around. So you can't just write it in a policy and go like, right, that's what we've agreed now. You have to kind of live it to make it work. Yeah, so those are my sides, and that's what I've started off with my different sized tomatoes at the end. And yeah, so I think I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Marlene. I'm just trying to see. Yeah, thank you for kind of giving a really great overview of food sovereignty as well, and also what cooperatives do and what they mean, and especially how it's not necessarily just a kind of one rule fits all, because that kind of goes against the idea of cooperatives. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, Andrew, have you had, this is a question from Andrew, sorry. Have you had opportunities of linking with local NHS doctors and hospitals?
I guess are you asking that specifically in the context of sort of COVID support and response, Andrew?
No, specifically, I suppose natural processes, natural remedies, good food to, you know, resolve problems that pills would otherwise resolve. Lots of aspects, but just a relationship with the NHS, which I think is very important. That's absolutely vital.
Yeah, so we're part of a group that does that's like linked to the clinical commission group with different partners within Waltham Forest, who I think our focus has been a bit more on the kind of people being prescribed to come and do some outdoor activity, because that's been our focus. But when they come to our site, we have lunch for all our volunteers, and some people join in the cooking of that. And we definitely have seen people whose diets have changed and whose understanding of what feels healthy and how food influences your mood has changed. So yeah, I think that is part of that conversation, definitely.
It's actually specific relationships with the doctors I'm thinking of.
It's through it's happened. Actually, yeah, that one of our outreach sites is a GP practice, but again, it's focused on the gardening for us, just because that's more what we do. But there are other groups in North East London who do more kind of like healthy cooking, healthy eating programs. Yeah, and then, like I said, we're working with this group called the Community Apothecary, so they're supporting people to think about their well-being in terms of how they might use herbs to heal.
Great. Jimmy.
Oh yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thanks for your presentation. I was just wondering, like, how, over what time period, or like, obviously you talked about having, like, was it 120 members now, or I can't remember exactly what it was, but it sounds like quite a large co-op. I was wondering, like, how quickly you've sort of scaled up in terms of numbers, and what has been both sort of a major challenge as a result of that, but also a major benefit.
So yeah, it's 28 co-op members, and I guess in 2008 we had 4 members, so it's grown and then shrunk slightly and then grown again, and but I think one of the biggest challenges probably has been when growth happens quite quickly. When you get one person who sort of says, oh, I don't quite get what's going on here, and they kind of slowly get their head around it, then that's easier than when you get sort of 6 people at the same time going like, what's going on? I don't know what's going on. And the time that we've really had to recognize the time that's needed to support induction and the kind of processes. And as you get bigger, then you have to remember that the ways that you relied on communicating as you were smaller just can't happen anymore, because people live further apart, or don't all use the same communication channels, those kind of things. A lot of our good in-passing conversations used to happen for some people as they were cycling to work together, and if not everyone cycles to work, they don't all get that opportunity. All those kind of things that we have to be aware of, I think. And also, just to say, at the 120 people, that number was the number of learners that we have, and we have like about 250 volunteers. So I think we have a model where the workers co-op sort of holds the core, if you like, of a much bigger community, which in itself is kind of interesting, because it's like, well, is that democratic, or should it be done differently? But I think what it's helped to do is to hold something that's quite solid, and not, whereas compared to some experiences that I've seen of other kind of community organizing, which is just based on who shows up in the room, or how long people stick around for, it's actually it's held together in a much longer kind of substantial way, I guess. But obviously it has its pros and cons as well.
No, that sounds like a far more sustainable model. And apologies for getting those numbers confused.
No, it's all right. I whizzed through it, I'm sorry. I was nervous.
No, it was great, thank you.
Some more questions here. Shall I go into these ones, or do you want to move on, Lizzie?
I think they might actually apply to the other speakers as well. So if we continue on, just in the interest of time, and then we'll make a note of those questions. Then we can, we can bring the question askers in at the end, if that's all right. But yeah, thank you, Marlena. That'd be great. So next up is Lucy from SUMA Whole Foods.
Need to hear me first. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, can we all see it? Yeah. So I'm Lucy and I work at SUMA Whole Foods, which has been a cooperative since 1977. I actually work in design and web and used to do checking in of goods in the warehouse. So something that we do at SUMA is we multi-skill across the business, and that'll be something I'll tell you a little bit more about later. So I'm going to do my best to answer all your questions on topic of Whole Foods and the co-op. So we're SUMA, we're an independent wholesaler of vegetarian, organic and natural foods. We distribute to the UK, and we did distribute internationally, but at the minute Brexit's put a little bit of a hold on that for a moment. But we are the largest worker-owned cooperative in the UK, and we're the largest equal payer in Europe. And then 2020, just a little bit of an overview, we did 69 million in sales, but that was quite a high number for us, like an unprecedented number, and I think that was due to the fact that people switched to shopping at home and probably switched to not going to large supermarkets and using their corner grocery stores and shops nearby. We also have been going through a big rebrand, and then we currently have 300 employees. Should really say members there, but I haven't done this in a while, so I'll change that. So we've got 300 members. And at SUMA, we have a vision. So under the vision, we have 5 headers. So as a business, all our business decisions are made around being a vegetarian wholesaler. One of the key things for us is to innovate in vegetarian products, environmentally friendly innovations, and then also how we do business in an environmentally friendly way. In terms of cooperation, we're led by the 7 principles, guiding principles for co-ops. And then under environment, we're trying to do business in a way that reduces our impact on the planet. So some things that we're doing is we're trying to switch our fleet over to biogas fuel. Don't currently have all our vehicles on biogas fuel, but that is an aim for us. And then finally, we want people to be happy who work for us. So we're also a workers co-op. So we try lots of different ways to equally decide on our benefits and policies at SUMA, and also proposals for the business going forward. I'll just move on. So I get the sense that you're all kind of familiar with the 7 cooperative principles, so I won't go into them too much, but we have a voluntary open membership. So that means that anybody who works at SUMA is able to be a member. We also have democratic member control, so we are able to vote on proposals and make decisions as a collective group. We work with other co-ops, so some particular examples of that are we work with cooperative farms for some of our SUMA brand food products. Also, we work with other co-ops in other parts of our business, whether it's IT or web, and support other co-ops as well. We have autonomy and independence, so SUMA is fully owned by its members. And then we have member economic participation, so we all have an equal share. And within that, we also have a concern for the community, and that's quite a local concern. So we do a lot with food banks. We run a lot of education workshops on what it is to be a workers co-op. Some things that we do is we run donations down to Taunton to be sent off to refugee aid. And those are just things I can think of off the top of my head. There's quite a lot. And then we also provide education, training, information. So we have quite a few people who are currently doing masters and degrees through SUMA. So a little bit about our history. So we were founded at the time that Maggie Thatcher was in power. The Vietnam War was coming to an end, and then Microsoft was founded with 2 people, and they are much bigger than us now. And then there was us. So we started out in Leeds. We had a warehouse in Leeds. At that time, that had like our goods covered half of the floor, and we had 7 founding members. And then fast forward sort of 10 years, we grew to 40 members, and we moved to Halifax. And it was mainly pre-pack, so lots of rice, bulk chickpeas, bulk beans. That's what we started out distributing. So it was mainly whole foods. And then some of those members that you see in this picture are also still members today. We had one founding member who was still with us up until about 6 months ago. So I think it's a real testament for working as part of a co-op. And now we are 200, 300 members strong. We have 3 sites, 4 sites actually, 3 in Elland and 1 distribution centre in London. We have, oh my gosh, just 1 second. I realise my battery's not plugged in. I don't want to die. Oh no. Sorry about this.
That's all good.
Yes, we're okay. What a panic. Okay. So yeah, so now as well as distributing wholesale, we also have our own 3 SUMA brands. So we have a conscious cleaning range, which is Eco Leaf, which is all derived from plant extracts and is biodegradable and sustainably sourced. And we have Alternative, again, that's 100% recyclable. We do a whole refill range. We do plastic free shampoos and conditioners. And I think you can also send your refills back with us for us to recycle. And then our SUMA food range as well. So that's a lot of your like basics, like your tomatoes and your coconut milks, and a lot of those are from cooperative farm producers. Within that, we've always tried to. Sorry. Oh, hello. So within that, we've always tried to be innovative. So something that we've just done is swapped all our kitchen towel and toilet tissue into recycled paper from compostable paper. We were the first to market with sunflower spread, apparently, and then some supermarkets onto the idea. And then that's a vegan pea and ham soup. And then we were exporting, so I'll go past that because we're not currently doing that at the minute. But this is a diagram on our membership structure and how we make decisions. So I'll try and explain this to you. So in the centre, we have all the members. And then the ring around the outside is our member council. So there's about 6 people on the member council, which the members elect. And the member council represents the voice of the membership. So if we have an issue or a proposal that we want to stand against, we might take that to the member council, who will then take it to the board. And both of those arrows go both ways because it's a conversation between all the different people involved. So because there are 200 people, as Marlene said, it becomes quite difficult to make decisions in large groups. So we have to have processes in place where we're able to make change and raise issues through different channels with the member council. And within the organisational structure, we have 3 different zones. We have a logistics zone, a service zone, and a commerce zone. And within each zone, we have zone leaders. And the idea is that each zone leader will speak to the other areas so that we have cross departmental sort of conversations between all the different zones. And then finally, we have multi-skilling within SUMA. So this is Alex. Alex drives our reach truck. She also works in the warehouse doing maintenance. and then she also works for marketing. And the reason for us having multi-skilling is for us to understand each other's roles, for us to appreciate how each job affects somebody else's job when they come in. It's also to put value on the role that everybody does. And because we're an equal pay co-op, everybody is paid exactly the same. So it's the emphasis is on that value, that no matter which role you do, everything is valuable. And because we have equal pay, our gender pay gap reporting is very easy. It never changes. And then finally, this is the cooperative picture. And I like to put these facts in just to give a picture of where we are within co-ops in the UK. So we have 37.7 billion of cooperative turnover, and of that, worker co-ops contributed 11 billion. Then over 200,000 people are earning their livings from co-ops directly. And then this is one of my favourite ones, is that 72% of co-ops survive their first 5 years, compared to 43% of companies. I think it's testament to the way that we work collaboratively together, and probably like the extra shared interest in cooperative working. And then finally, that SUMA, we are the largest worker-owned co-op in Europe and equal pay employer. So it's a bit, I just tried to give you a picture of how we run as a co-op together, and some of the things that we do. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you so much, Lucy. That was really a fascinating look at SUMA and like some really amazing facts that I had no idea about as well. Yeah, does anybody have any questions for Lucy? Just trying to scroll through. There's a couple of questions in the chat, but they kind of I might ask them to everyone at the end, if that's all right. So if nobody has any direct questions to Lucy, then we will move straight on to Kelly from Unicorn Grocery. Kelly, over to you. Oh, Kelly, you're muted.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Kelly. Hello. I've been at Unicorn about 22, 23 years. Unicorn's been trading 25 years in September. So I'm going to share the screen and talk a little bit about how the way we work relates to food sovereignty. Here we go. Has that worked? So a little bit about us. We're an ingredient shop, and we offer a diverse Manchester customer base, a really great range of affordable, fresh and wholesome foodstuffs. There's a big emphasis on organic and fair trade and local produce. And we really encourage cooking from scratch, and it's the most affordable way to feed yourself if you've got the skills and the time. We're about the size of a supermarket. We're just one shop and there's about 70 of us. So we're in between the sizes of the other two co-ops that have spoken so far. And I can understand kind of the things that arise as you grow and change at different paces. We can all learn from each other so that we can do it in the most resilient way, I think. So the staff that you see in our shop are the people that run the shop as well. So this is the picture of outside the shop. Currently it's covered in scaffolding because we're having a little bit of work done. Most of all, Unicorn is a values-driven business. we see success as something more than just the figures on the balance sheet, as the other co-ops who've spoken so far. If we can provide a decent living for our staff and our suppliers, if we are increasing the amount of land farmed sustainably and improving community wealth rather than shareholder wealth, if we are challenging traditional models of business ownership and control, then we feel pretty happy that we're succeeding. As co-ops are guided by a clear set of values and principles, it means they do more for communities in which they operate. Many mainstream business models are built on the assumption that natural and social capital are in virtual limitless supply. Cooperatives are generally more sensitive to those limits. Without the pressures that come from shareholder demands for immediate profits, they are innately more sustainable, able to plan for the longer term. They're viable businesses that demonstrate on a daily basis that doing the right thing and success should go hand in hand. In the case of food business, these values and long-term thinking tend to align really well with food sovereignty principles. So here's a few examples of how we work at Unicorn aligns to those principles. So here's something that I heard at the grocer conference last year, which is like your mainstream grocer Bible, really. They know what's happening in the industry, and they never used to talk about sustainability or organics and climate change, but you know, it's everywhere now, and their whole conference was based on sustainability. And they pointed out that our global food system is responsible for 60% of biodiversity loss. So it's kind of central really to shaping the world that we live in. And I thought it was quite not something that we didn't know, but it was very significant. And as co-ops, we are guided by clear values and principles. So it means we can do more for communities in which we operate. Many mainstream businesses, sorry, I've read that bit. So working in the retail, there's always some kind of focus on the ethical sourcing, providing goods that support healthy and greener lifestyles. We want to make food accessible. Decent food should not be the preserve for the wealthy. So we really try and compete with supermarkets on price. And our trading model helps us do that. We have a turnover of around 8 million every year. And from that, 4 million is generating a market for organic produce. And we're also generating a market for small local producers, fair trade producers, and other social enterprises. The food we eat not only affects our health, but in many ways, it also shapes our world. Much of our produce is organic, supporting farmers who nourish their soil and build diversity. Fresh organic fruit and veg takes a starring role at Unicorn. We've got the best selection you'll find at prices that compare really well. And as we go direct to growers, it's really fresh. I mean, there's some that we get from a couple of miles down the road that's picked out of the ground, and then it's on the shelf in a couple of hours. I mean, that's a fairly unique situation, but it's not unusual for it to be picked from the farm and delivered the same day. Another thing that we think that co-ops are better at, you know, we don't start businesses with an exit plan of how we're going to build a brand and sell on a business. You're based on a common reason, a common collective goal, with a long-term view of how to deliver on this. And the long-term security of your workers' income and your suppliers' income, and that market that you've generated feels like quite a responsibility. You don't want to let those supply chains down. So it means that your focus is on the long term and building resilience within the whole movement. So for us, the growers take centre stage always. And so as well as making sure that how we trade has a positive impact, We also have some funds that we use to support those who we know suffer the most through the supply chain because of the volatile weather system, or because of how our economic system values their labour much less. So we have a 1% fund that accounts for 1% of our veg sales, which goes into a growers fund. And people use this. This is growers that we do get quite a lot of supply from, to build capacity for longer term. You know, if you've got a polytunnel, it can act a bit like an insurance policy for a grower, because that bit of their crop is less vulnerable to volatile weather conditions. And recently we did fund one of Kindling's projects, which is Farm Starts, who provided with quite a lot of produce through the summer. And that was to increase their vegetable storage and a preparation area. Solidarity is one of the international co-op principles, and each year we set aside an amount that's equal to 5% of our wages into this fund. It's 5% of our wages, with the idea that as we grow, that fund grows. We can't manipulate it as you can manipulate your net profit. So it should truly reflect what we can share as a business. So this goes to all sorts of things: cooperative ventures, environmental activism, supporting asylum seekers, community growing schemes. And that's in the UK. We also, the international part of the fund, which is the bigger amount, that's 4% of that 5%. It's generally working in alignment with social justice movements. And this is demonstrated by supporting some projects which more mainstream funders maybe wouldn't, like direct action, supporting communities in resistance globally, whether that's Honduran community battling international mining corporations, or Indian women who are agricultural workers fighting for better labour standards. And they're just a couple of examples of recent ones. But generally it's people taking ownership of their own food systems, and so that they have got that resilience themselves, rather than any top-down organisations. We do find that this is also really useful for us as an organisation to keep educated about what's happening in the whole global food system. You get very stuck on the day-to-day of buying and selling your vegetables. And, you know, we always need to remind ourselves that we're part of this global food system that's got all these injustices in it. And, you know, and that's what we're trying to do while we perform our daily work of just being good grocers, really. Cooperatives also try to meet their social obligations. Tax is at the heart of a fair society, and Unicorn is a fair tax mark, which means we've been independently verified as paying our fair share of corporation tax. And interestingly, if you look at the list of organisations registered, a vast amount of them are cooperatives. And in a sector with low hourly rates of pay, like SUMA, we don't pay quite as much as SUMA, but we do pay above the living wage, and it's good for our sector. And we're providing secure employment for just over 70 people. And there's a picture of a recent, well, about just over a year ago now, when we could have nice events outside, and having community events is really important to us. One of our workers with a Co-op Love t-shirt on. Education and knowledge building are part of co-ops. They're in our DNA, and it's included in the international principles. And some of that is just learning through on the job. You know, you may come because you're interested in organics or fair trade, and then along the way you pick up other bits of passion and knowledge from your colleagues. And you may come with very little business management experience, but you are to an extent managing a business. So over time, there will be training and shadowing so that people can build up the skills that they haven't come with, and hopefully also get excited about the principles and the story behind the food movement that we're involved in. When it comes to customers, we build education into all our communications. We've never thought there's any value in marketing just for the sake of it. It's just about communicating our values and our ethics, and making that relationship between our customers and where their food comes from a little bit closer, and understanding the impact, you know, whether that is on biodiversity, the carbon used, the treatment of the labour conditions. But we really try and do it in a positive way so people feel empowered to make a difference. And also we like to get involved in local campaigns ourselves. Obviously people are passionate about many issues. And one of the things that we've done, because we've decided that we don't want to have lots of shops, or maybe it's not in our capacity to do that with the structure that we've got, we offer support to others who want to set up a similar kind of business that with a cooperative structure, and we have a free guide that we offer, and they can visit us, they can ask more in-depth questions. And when we're back up and running again, doing visits, which hopefully will be later in the year, we kind of do annual visits for people who have then taken that step to actually setting up a business. So worker co-ops are often working for environmental good. We're proud to create a zero waste in the business, which is really unusual in the supermarket business. Years ago, I was talking at a conference with people from mainstream supermarkets, and everyone was really surprised when I said that. But because we've always worked in that way, and it's intrinsic to how we trade, you know, not creating waste is just at the heart of, as many other principles are. It's been easy to do, you know. Things that there's a glut of, you know, we can make into soups and stews. We have a free box of food that needs to be eaten that day. Customers can just take from the free box for themselves, or if it's, you know, in a condition that they don't think is good for themselves, maybe they give it to the rabbit. We have all our peelings and compost goes to our local growers to make, that then goes onto their land as compost. So we're trying to close the circle where we can, and because it's built into how we work, it doesn't cost us anything to do this. It's just part of our model. And also we don't sell plastic bags, and you can buy a cloth bag, but the idea that we have is you don't have to keep buying cloth bags either. So if you've not brought a bag with you, you can just borrow a bag for £1.85, and then the next time you get your money back. So just trying to take away the need to buy and consume these things. So worker co-ops are democratic and empower workers. And sometimes that takes time, as was mentioned earlier, because there's a lot to learn when you come into a co-op. Well-being and good working relationships are at the forefront of our co-op, and I imagine all co-ops. And that motivates us to work hard to make the business a success, and to then shine a light on the principles, because if you are not successful with competing in your arena, then you're not a model that you're saying to other people, come on, you can do this, it works. It's got its challenges, but you know, it works. At SUMA, we're a flat wage structure with no gender pay gap, and gender inequality has always been a given. And I don't know about the research within co-ops, but I know we attract a good balance. We offer great flexibility for men and women. So we see people who've got children, you know, there seems to be an equal balance between those, taking the options of flexible working. so that they can take care of their children part-time. We have 6 selected roles at Unicorn this year. 4 of them are women, 2 of them are men. So it seems to be always the case that there is a good balance there, not just with the wage, but kind of with who takes on what roles, whether they're very physical roles, whether they're office-based roles. A really nice balance there. We see ourselves very much part of the food sovereignty movement. And like the other co-op speaking, we are working for a food system that benefits everyone, the consumer, the worker and the producer, one that nourishes the planet instead of degrading it. And this is put into the action in the way we trade, what we do with our profits and the projects that we put our energy into supporting. Thank you. That's
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you. I need to stop sharing now.
That's all right.
No. Do that. I think I need to go to a different.
Yeah, there we go. That was
Has it done it? Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was yeah, really interesting and so fascinating for me as well to see to learn more about the workers' co-op just up the road from me. Does anybody have any direct questions for Kelly? Try to see any in the chat. If not, we will go straight to the questions for everyone. So I've got one in the chat here from Matt. Do you want to ask yours, Matt, in yourself? So just about buying equipment versus increasing the number of workers, if you're still here, Matt.
Yeah, hi. It was really interesting hearing everybody speak. Thanks. Yeah, it was maybe a bit removed from food sovereignty, but yeah, question around, well, just really whether you had any thoughts around like whether or how you balance like buying machinery to do work versus employing or taking on more members to do the same work. So increasing productivity to benefit your current members or taking on more workers to increase your membership.
Should I kick off on that one? I think because it might have been prompted by me mentioning about, using people power rather than machinery power. I guess that's one factor is like, are you talking about an environmental impact of using fossil fuels is one consideration we would use. Another one might be the enjoyability of the work. I think we've just spent a lot of a certain amount of investment into a kind of a sort of database box scheme system that some of the other box schemes, certainly ones that we know in London, use. That means less time will be spent answering emails by our staff because it relies on the customer being able to kind of like log in and set when their holidays are and whether they want to change their bag size and so on. So that's a bit more automated, and that's been quite an interesting thing of like, well, actually, yeah, where is that cost going and where's that work going? Same issue. We have endless discussions about how much we want to get into people buying things online versus coming in person. Taking card payments rather than sitting and counting cash, and the sort of outsourced costs and times of those. So I think they're just interesting discussions to have in a world where we've been promised this thing of automation giving us all like freedom in our lives, and in reality it's got the potential for more and more kind of jobs where computers are in control of what you do. And telling you which shelves to pick things off and so on. And so I think it's worth remembering that term Luddite is used quite disparagingly now, but actually the Luddites were fighting, they weren't against the use of the machinery, they were just against the way that it was being introduced and the way that that was affecting the kind of the meaningfulness of and the value of their work. So I think that would be the principle that we would use.
Thank you. I don't know if anyone else, any of the other speakers have an answer to that one as well.
I suppose at different points in time, you might actively want to generate labour. I know early on that was very much a focus, but we're now at capacity in our building. But I mean, we still pack things by hand. I know when we introduced conveyor belts, there was a conveyor belts, but people were getting really bad backs by stretching over and pulling heavy things along. So we say sometimes it's for the benefit of the well-being of the worker, and I suppose it's to understand the function and the purpose of what you're doing.
Awesome. There's another question from Janine, who I think has left. She's asked, has anyone had workers from the government Kickstart scheme?
We've got somebody due to start fairly soon. I think we've got a couple of roles supporting our adult learning administration, and one that would kind of sit across our production and like sort of food growing and our veg box packing. But I don't think they've started yet. I think in the end they've come through the Land Workers Alliance registration. Yeah.
There's a shaking of heads from Lucy and Kelly. So moving on to the next question. Yeah, this is a question for all of you as well, I think, from Elle Husband. Do you have any racial and ethnic diversity within your co-ops?
Ours is not it's not as good as it should be. Our customer base is very diverse, and our workers are not, and it's something that our HR team are doing some work on, and we've had some support, but it's definitely something that we can do better.
We are currently actually doing some DEIB work within SUMA to sort of look at our diversity, equality, inclusion. I'd say we do have a diverse workforce, but again, ours could be better as well. And we're really at the beginning of that journey, which is quite exciting for us. So I think we've got working with can't remember the name of it. We're working with an agency actually. I think it's I'll have to remember. I just did the survey today. I'm terrible. So we're doing some work around that. We're doing a lot of like consultation workshops on how we feel as workers in the workplace before they then make recommendations of how we can improve as a whole. So we're currently working on that.
Yeah, similarly, we our co-op membership is not definitely not representative of the local population. Our wider community, if you like, including all our kind of volunteers and sessional workers and learners, is more representative. But you know, that in itself, that's not good enough in terms of, if you like, the sort of leadership being what's visible in the co-op. And so we've got kind of two approaches on addressing that. One is sort of looking at the way we do recruitment and how we support people to kind of see the co-op and the way of working as being something that can be for them and that can work. And sort of looking within before you even get to recruitment. Okay, well, what's going on that might be barriers to people being included, and that's not just in terms of racial diversity, but also in terms of gender and sexuality, and also, you know, forms of neurodiversity as well. And then we also we've kind of developed a partnership with the Ubele Initiative, who are a Black-led multi-generational organisation that's sort of looking at supporting kind of community resilience and community infrastructure across Black and minoritized communities in London, but also across the UK. And our partnership with them is mainly based on another site that's another plant nursery that we've been supporting to stay as a plant nursery. But it's kind of evolved into a thing where we're doing a joint project with them and with Land in Our Name. So we're sort of looking at racial justice around land, and we're looking at then supporting Black-led growing enterprises and sort of identifying what are the barriers to people, Black people and people of colour being involved in food growing, which you know, are many, partly because of the sort of you know, like racist society that we live in, but particularly because of the kind of perception of farming and the reality of farming as being sort of very white and very male in the UK, and what that kind of means in terms of how people can access land and how people can kind of get into that or see that as an opportunity. So that's a piece of work that we hope will help kind of support us to see how that will kind of change things within our co-op, as well as supporting that to be actually something where enterprises that are Black-led can also flourish.
Thank you. There's a question from Raquel as well, also directed to Helen, who says it's about the multi-stakeholder model, wondering if the co-ops presented have considered this model, and also, yeah, Helen, if you could share some thoughts about how it is or was working in Manchester Veg People. I don't know who wants to go first.
Do you want me to explain a bit about what we do, and then you lot can say whether you thought about doing it? Shall I do that? So we went from a multi-stakeholder co-op with Manchester Veg People, which was, I think Marlena mentioned that as a potential one of the many co-ops, types of co-ops, but it's basically having different stakeholders all part of the co-op. So with Manchester Veg People, it's the growers are part of it, the buyers, who are the restaurants and the university and schools, and then also the workers who are in the distribution part in the middle, and all of them are members of the co-op. And the idea is that, or the reason that we set that up, was that partly it was about bringing people together across the food system. So creating a relationship of understanding and trust between growers and buyers, and the distributors in the middle. As Lizzie just hinted, it hasn't been running this last year because basically when lockdown happened, all of the restaurants shut. So that, and the university at the time as well, although the university, as soon as they kind of knew what they were doing, came back on board. But yeah, I mean, we still feel like it's a really important model because of the kind of, I suppose, the buy-in, in a way, that the idea is that it, like the relationship of trust that, again, all of the co-ops on tonight have talked about, and of creating that understanding of what goes on, but kind of that if you're part of something and you own something, you kind of more buy into it. So that was kind of why we went down that route. But yeah, I mean, it definitely has challenges as well, in terms of people being very, very busy, like all the growers being very busy and all of the buyers being very busy at a different time. But it's yeah, I still think it's really good, great model, and we would love to see it working again. But I won't. I could go on about it for ages. I'll pass over to the rest of you to see if you've got any thoughts or comments.
I guess we sort of were set out on the worker co-op path before we had any big number of customers or anything. So I suppose it just sort of stayed as that. I mean, I remember going to visit a community supported agriculture, the canal side, and sort of enjoying the simplicity of that model, that, you know, they've got like, these are our box scheme members, you know, we know they're paying this much for the year. That means we know how much we've got to spend on farmers and seeds, and we just get on with it, and then they'll get whatever we produce. But that's, yeah, I guess because we're running a more sort of interwoven operation where our production doesn't sort of, if we actually wanted our commercial market garden to be making the full amount of money it could make, it wouldn't involve so many people, and it would just have fewer skilled growers, more machines, and less people around. And but the volunteering is a really key aspect for us. So it's all quite interwoven in that way, and that makes it more complicated to work out who would be a member or not a member if you were doing something multi.
Yes, can I just add to that actually? So the other co-op that we also were helped set up is a veg box scheme and is a workers co-op. So we have different, it was, I think that they all can work alongside each other really, really well. And also Unicorn helped us set up Manchester Veg People were involved in setting up Manchester Veg People at the start. Just so you didn't think I was saying it's the best kind of co-op.
There's also the Better Food Shed is sort of, I'm not sure if it's formally a cooperative, but it's like involving the box schemes in London that buy produce and the growers in East Anglia mainly who sell produce into those box schemes, working together. So that's sort of similar to Manchester Veg People in that setup of both sides coming together and saying, what do we need from each other?
Someone else want to answer? If not, I would really love to, only if I'm not putting you on the spot, Mandolin, just given you're tuning in from Southern Appalachia, helping lead food sovereignty work there. It'd be really interesting to hear a bit about your work. But if you don't want to, that's absolutely fine. We have got some more questions.
So hi. I actually was just calling a friend of mine who had been involved with a food co-op in a county next to us, because I know it wasn't doing very well, and I was calling her to really quickly try and find out what was going on with it so I could maybe share something about it and see if you all had any input on that. I'm also here with my 5-year-old who's not handling me being in this meeting long very well, but yeah, we are in the rural United States here on the edge of the Appalachian Range down in South Carolina. And this isn't an area where we've had many worker co-ops. We do have some credit unions and some utility co-ops here, but I was curious to know how many of your co-ops actually started like, I guess in a void or in some sort of vacuum where there might have been co-ops, or if there were already a lot of existing co-ops when yours had begun, because I'm trying to figure out how to make that more acceptable here.
So I wasn't one of the founders of Unicorn. Unicorn was about 2.5 years old when I started, and there had been a host of whole food co-ops a decade or more earlier. But at that point in time, in the mid and later 90s, they were shown lots of barriers, people saying this is never going to work. It's a business model that's dead, or the offer that you want to give is not something that people want. And so I think they had such a strong vision that they grew the momentum by having a couple of years of doing their research, talking to other people, getting a group of really passionate people together, and then showing that the model could work. So it might be looking overseas for examples of successful models, but but it's hard for people to wrap their head around it if it's not a big business model they're familiar with. And that's the first stepping stone, that first barrier to get people to understand how it can work and why it's different in a positive way.
Yeah, I guess that chimes true for Organically. I also wasn't there at the beginning, but I think there was a strong vision. There was also a very, very slow start in terms of not in a bad way, in a deliberate way of just kind of this will evolve organically, so to speak, and see what happens and not. But you know, we were able to do that because we weren't reliant on, people weren't trying to make their livelihood from it initially, and then once it had got established, we were able to bring that side of it in. So yeah, I guess it's just about pooling those examples from loads of different places and forging your own path, really.
Yeah, one of the things that had been said, I can't remember which of the co-op presenters might have spoken about it, was just that I mean, this is the case in the States too, but that societies aren't very trusting, like people and communities don't have a lot of trust in each other to do the right thing or to do work in the most efficient way. So the equal pay model is something that I know would not go over well here, even though I think that that's wonderful. And it's something I would love to see us work towards if we were able to get a worker co-op off the ground. But yeah, I'll definitely be looking for some examples, and especially of co-ops that started maybe in similar socio-political circumstances where they were not as well known at the time.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and good discussion. Got a couple more questions. This is to everyone. I guess kind of building on that, how can we promote cooperation and support the growth of more co-ops to take over the food system and create a fairer one? Maybe we've kind of touched on that a bit, but I don't know if anyone, Lucy, not to put you on the spot at all, but if you wanted to chime in about wholesale. So don't worry if you don't.
Could you read the question again?
Yeah, sure.
Quite a long one.
How can we promote cooperation and support the growth of more co-ops to take over the food system and create a fairer food system?
A fairer food system. That's quite so I think it's you build it into the framework of the way you do business. And I mean, I'm basically on the web and design side, but just some of the things that we think about is when we pick suppliers for products, we choose cooperative farmers. When we we need to bring outside expertise in, we look for other co-ops to work with. Then when, like a bit like Unicorn, we give back to fair tax, we participate in the solid fund. So it's making sure that within the way that you work, you then support the environment as well. Is that helpful?
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. I don't know if anyone else has an answer.
I think Lucy's answer was really good about it being about the core of how you trade, and it's little by little, step by step, and keep making connections, things like this. I think you can't rush worker co-ops. Certainly can't rush the co-ops that Helen was talking about that are multi-linked. They need time and they need to be patient with people and as they grow. But there's a lot, there's more momentum now. There's a lot of models out there that are doing really well, and I think that values have been challenged over the last year, and people are thinking more about what's important. Nature's important, good food, good health's important, community and compassion's important, and I think these are values that are at the heart of the co-op movement, and they have been since the Rochdale pioneers, about building justice into it. So just keep building on this and just talking about, you know, the good models that are out there, and, you know, we all need to just support each other where we can.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that links back to what Mandolin was saying as well about it. I mean, somehow you've got to sort of rebuild trust in the community, haven't you? And I guess the only way you can do that is by start showing trust yourself and kind of trying to sort of feed positivity into things and hope that reflects back. And it's not easy to do, but I think it's partly about sort of supporting people to see that they're making, it's getting away from that thing about like, oh, this is a lifestyle choice of like a kind of like a fashion thing, or you can kind of tell who's doing it in a genuine way and who's sort of just there being a bit, you know, like, oh, I've got this cool hipster brand that I'm making, or that kind of thing. So you just sort of got to go with that a bit. And I thought it was really interesting when I visited Unicorn years ago that they were really upfront about being a workers co-op. That's, you know, like that's right across the front of your building, and very underplayed about being vegetarian or vegan. Whereas I think nowadays, and similarly, I was involved in a community environmental centre that, you know, had a community cafe that didn't mention the fact that it was vegan. Whereas now you can say that and it's okay, and things have shifted slightly in the culture. So I guess it's just about biding our time and, you know, keeping true to our principles, and slowly things will shift.
That's great. There's one more question from Helen. I think, Helen, do you want to ask that one? And then
maybe to yes, it's very quick for possibly an enormous question, but we with Kindling Farm are about to go from having quite a small number of members to having potentially 380 plus in terms of the community shares campaign that's happening, which is amazing. We're really excited about growing that much. But we did wonder if you had any top tips for the best way that you feel, because engagement's so important of your members, for how you think scaling up and engaging people at that scale. What would be your top tip perhaps for each of you?
Shall I go first? I think probably just being realistic about the amount of time it will take to sort of to engage with people and to communicate, and it's not something that you can rush or skimp on. So you have to factor that in. It's important.
Yeah, and understanding the depths of input that you want from that group of people, because they've not been on this journey, and you know, it might take a year for them to understand that journey, although they're obviously really excited by it. So, you know, making sure that the discussions and the dialogue that they're involved in meets kind of where you expect them to be, and so you can build on it.
I think being part of a 300 member co-op, it's some things will work in the way that you engage people, and some things just won't, and you'll have to change as you go along. You know, we've started the member council that we have, which represents the members, only a year ago, and in that time the way that they have engaged the membership has changed at least 3 or 4 times. You know, and you'll find that different people want to engage in different ways. Some people like a phone call, some people like emails, some people just want to vote. So it really depends on the answers that you want. So it is trial and error in terms of, so be patient.
Well, that's really good advice. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's time. I'm gonna spend the last 30 seconds just because it is the last of our Kindling Farm Webinar Series, and this is all, well, it wasn't all about, but it's kind of helping to kind of draw more upon the issues that we as Kindling Farm and as part of the kind of wider Kindling family are kind of exploring or trying to tackle. So yeah, and it also just because it is just under 2 weeks away before we and before the end of our campaign to attract community investors to help us buy Kindling Farm. So I'm just going to put the website in the chat. So yeah, you can head there, and yeah, like I said, it ends on the share offer ends on the 3rd of July. You can invest anywhere from £200. Obviously capital is at risk, so bear that in mind, but you can find all the information out on the ethics website. And yeah, help us. We are already also a cooperative, so that kind of fits really well. And yeah, help us to establish Kindling Farm, and yeah, tell your friends about it as well. But that's everything. Yeah, from us. Thank you again all so much for coming, and a massive thank you to all the speakers, and yeah, we hope to work with you a lot more, and yeah, let's keep on sharing this amazing way of working with the rest of the world. Like I said, I'll put the recording of this onto our YouTube channel so you can share it with everyone and hopefully inspire some more people, sow some more seeds to start some more cooperatives. But yeah, unless any of the speakers have anything else to say, I think that's... Oh,
No, thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you for hosting.
cool. All right, well, yeah, have a lovely evening or daytime wherever you are in the world, and yeah, see you soon on some path.
Thank you. Bye.
That was great. Thanks, you lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, you're super welcome.
It was super useful seeing everybody else's presentations as well. I'm so used to talking about us in a co-op sense, and to think of it in a food sovereignty way. I've definitely got some things that I'm going to go back and maybe refresh in my presentation, definitely. So that was useful for me.
Oh, good. That's really great. I had loads of huge questions